What's the difference between jump and leap, engine and motor? How do you say you in the plural, like ustedes or vosotros? How do you use the expression due to? Also, we'll be looking at the nonsense words of a famous Beatles song in this episode of Aprender Inglés con Craig. I know what you're thinking. Where's Reza? Well, he'll be back very soon. Until then, I'll answer some of the questions you've been sending during the summer. Hello, my name's Craig, and if this is the first time you're listening to this podcast, you're very welcome. This is a podcast to help you improve your English, whatever you need English for. So the idea is that we take your grammar, your vocabulary, your pronunciation, your idioms, your collocations, all aspects of your English up to the next level. Let's start this week with an email from Alberto Gallego, who's in Australia. Alberto says, "Hi Reza and Craig, I've been listening to you since you started podcasting, and I'm enjoying every podcast you've created." Well, thanks Alberto. Thank you very much. I've got several questions about English grammar. Maybe you can talk about them in one or in several podcasts, but I thought they could be interesting. Well, Alberto, they are interesting. I've answered most of them on this episode, and when Reza gets back, we'll answer your other questions. So Alberto's first question is about the second form of the plural you. When he says something like, thanks to you, sometimes he feels like he's focusing only on one person and not the whole group. He says, well, I guess the best way to make sure everyone understands me would be to say, thanks to all of you, or thanks to you two, or thanks to both of you, for example. Yes, Alberto, you're absolutely right. It is a bit difficult. How do you say vosotros or ustedes in the plural in English? Well, there's no pronoun for the plural you in English. Now, this could be a problem if there's no visual eye contact with people. Say, for example, you're standing behind a door and maybe there's one of you, maybe there are several of you, and from the other side of the door, somebody says, oh, thanks to you, or you are very helpful. Well, are they speaking to one person or are they speaking to everybody? You don't know. It's impossible to know. So your solutions of saying thanks to all of you or thanks to both of you, that's a perfect solution. Actually, in the past, many years ago, there used to be a plural of you. It was ye, Y-E. And the singular in those days was thou, Thou. So ye would be for more than one person and thou only for one person. They were the old versions of the pronoun you. We spoke more about this on episode 167. So if you're interested in more explanations about Old English, go to inglespodcast.com/167. Now, there are different ways of saying you plural in different parts of the world. For example, in the southern United States, in Louisiana, Alabama, for example, they say y'all, Y''A''L, y'all. So they'd say, hey y'all, how you doing? Or how y'all doing today? This is also common in African American informal English. So, hey y'all, what's happening? Or, hey, thanks to you all. Thanks to y'all. So they would say that in Southern America, some Southern American states. And in parts of the US and Canada and Australia, they might say you guys. So, hey, you guys, how you doing? Or, hey, thanks, you guys, that was really nice. You guys. In the UK and Australia, you lot. Y-O-U, new word, L-O-T, you lot. Hey, you lot, or thanks, you lot, or how's it going, you lot. and also in parts of the UK. In fact, my brother-in-law says use. So he puts, some people in the south of England put an S on the pronoun use. So you might hear use lot, or what are yous doing, or it's really nice to see yous. So you might hear an S on the U. But yeah, it is a problem. It can be a problem. Although usually, if you have eye contact with the person, it's obvious from the context that you're speaking to more than one person. Alberto's second question is about the use of due to, D-U-E-T-O. And Alberto says, this morning when I was speaking with my wife, she corrected me, I'm guessing his wife is Australian, when I used the first form of the singular. I said, due to I'll finish work, when I should have said it in another way. And unfortunately, Alberto has forgotten the context. But he says, could you explain to us how to use due to, please? Well, due to really means, in most cases, because of, or debido a, or gracias a. For example, the football game was postponed due to the weather. Or, I arrived late due to the fact that the trains were on strike. Now, when do you use due to, and when do you use due to the fact that? Well, in the first example, I said the game was postponed due to the weather. So it's due to plus noun phrase. I was late due to the traffic. I learned English due to Craig and Reza's podcast, for example. If you continue with another phrase that has a verb in it, so a verb phrase, then you need to use due to the fact. And my second example was, I arrived late due to the fact that the trains were on strike. So I have a second verb, were, after due to. So I need to use due to the fact. I didn't go to the beach due to the fact that it was raining, for example. It was raining, verb, I need due to the fact. I need to study English due to the fact that I didn't study English at school, for example. So maybe, Alberto, maybe when you said to your wife, due to I'll finish work, perhaps it should have been due to the fact that I'll finish work. Or maybe due to the fact that I will have finished work. An example could be, okay, I'll pick up the kids from school today due to the fact that I'll have finished work by then. Although that's quite long, I would probably say in conversational English, I'll pick up the kids from school because I'll have finished work by then. So I'd probably use because in that situation. But it's difficult for me to know, Alberto, without the context of what you said to your wife. But I'm guessing it might be because there was a verb phrase after due to, and then you needed to say due to the fact that. There's another meaning of due to, which kind of means expected. Expected. In Spanish, it would be suponerse que alguien haga algo. For example, the Prime Minister is due to meet with the President tomorrow. So this is quite a formal expression. Or Reza is due to record some more podcasts with me next week, for example. You can also use due by itself. When's the rent due? When do I have to pay the rent? When's it due? When do I have to pay it? Or the car's due for a service. A service is revisión del coche. The car's due for a service. Or I think you're due for a haircut. Or if somebody's pregnant, if a woman's pregnant, when's the baby due? When's your baby due? When are you having the baby? When's it due? Now, there are 3 different kinds of pronunciation for D-U-E. One way is the way I say it, which is due, which is J-E-W, it sounds like. You could also say due, which is like D-Y-U, due. And American English is probably more like do, D-O, do, like do you like. So when's the bus due? Or when's the train due? So those three pronunciations are also written on the website at inglespodcast.com/226. Thanks very much for your questions, Alberto. And you did write another question about the use of the comma, and I'll answer that when Reza gets back. Next, we have an audio message from Santiago from Mexico City.
Hello, Reza and Craig. My name is Santiago Sanchez, and I'm from Mexico City, so cordial greetings from here. I want you to know a little point of view of mine about these both beautiful languages, which are English and Spanish. So please let me begin. I've been studying English since my childhood, and I have to admit that nowadays it continues being difficult for me because it certainly has its own complexities, on my own, of course. But the point is that I think that a language is a beautiful way of thinking. For example, Spanish for the Spanish speakers and English for the English speakers, and etc. And the first mistake we do on learning a new language is trying to align the languages with each other. That's the error because they have different grammatical structures and, of course, of expressions. In German, for example, the main verb has to be located at the end of the sentence. That's the order of thinking of Germans. And if we want to translate something into German into Spanish, we will find that our sequence of thinking has been altered. So we shouldn't combine the languages. That's all I have to share with you. Time's up. Hope hearing from you.
Yes, absolutely, Santiago. I agree with everything you say. You should study the languages separately, not translate directly, and also incorporate the culture of the language into your studies so that you're also studying the people and the culture and the way of life, because that brings the language alive, and it also helps you to interact and communicate with the native speakers. And that's why I think most people learn languages, isn't it? Communication. You want to communicate with people, and the best way to do that is to communicate on their terms. So using their expressions, their idioms, their language. So absolutely agree 100% with you, Santiago. Thank you for your message. By the way, very, very fluent English, very clear. I understood everything you said, and you obviously feel very comfortable speaking in English. Just one small thing, just one thing that you could improve on. You said the first mistake we do, or the collocation with mistake is make. So you should have said the first mistake we make. Thanks again for your message, and please send us another one. We love hearing all of your voice messages, and we always put voice messages eventually into our podcasts. Next, we have an email from Rafael Leon from Mexico. Rafael says, "Good afternoon from Mexico. I hope you're okay. This is Rafael Leon from Guadalajara, Mexico again. I try to improve my English every day. I've been reading National Geographic magazine, but I have some doubts with some words and their translations in Spanish." And then Rafael gives us a few words that he's having problems with and asks us to explain the difference between them. Thank you for your email, Rafael. We'll do that now. And very good that you're using the National Geographic magazine for your English studies. I have a good friend here in Spain who pretty much learned English only by reading Time magazine. He loved Time magazine. He studied the articles with a dictionary, and slowly, week after week, understanding English, his vocabulary increased incredibly well. So a very good idea to learn from magazines. So well done for using the National Geographic. The first doubt that Raphael has is between the words leap, L-E-A-P, and jump, J-U-M-P. Because, as Raphael correctly says, the translation to Spanish for leap and jump is saltar. So, what's the difference? Well, not much, to be honest. Leap and jump are very similar. Perhaps I would say jump is more common, so we use it more. If you jump, you obviously bend your knees, you push against the ground with your feet, and you move quickly upwards into the air. If you leap, you jump high in the air, or you jump a long distance. So those are two dictionary definitions. For example, Spider-Man can leap between tall buildings. Spider-Man leaps between buildings. Now, when I think of jump, I often think of children jumping, for example, on a trampoline or jumping in the air, and also athletes jumping quite high, or maybe if a person is suicidal, they might jump out of a window. Of course, a parachutist jumps out of a plane with a parachute, so you could jump out of a plane. Now, when I think of leap, L-E-A-P, I think of animals like deer, ciervo, leaping up in the air, or maybe ballet dancers leaping gracefully on the stage. But as I said, Raphael, very, very similar words. There are some common idioms with jump and some idioms with leap, so let me explain those to you. Jump on the bandwagon is quite a common idiom. To jump on the bandwagon, which means to join everybody else in support of a person or a cause, not necessarily in a sincere way. Let me give you an example. There is quite a famous businessman and podcaster called John Lee Dumas, who has a very successful website and business called Entrepreneur on Fire, or EOF. And because he's been so successful, I mean, he earns hundreds of thousands of dollars a month on his business. And because he's so successful, many other bloggers, many other podcasters have jumped on the bandwagon and released similar websites and podcasts to try and earn a lot of money. So everybody, when they saw the success, they jumped on the bandwagon and copied him to try and be successful. You can also jump for joy. Joy is like happiness. So that's not physically jumping in the air, but it is being very, very happy. For example, Pepito jumped for joy when Valencia beat Madrid 2-0. And at the end of the summer, I'm not exactly jumping for joy when I think about going back to work. So there's kind of a sarcastic use of it. I'm not exactly jumping for joy when I think of going back to work. Another expression with jump is to jump the gun, G-U-N, pistola, jump the gun, which is to do something before the expected time, before the time that's expected. For example, they met 3 weeks ago and they're talking about getting married. How can they get married only 3 weeks after meeting each other? They're really jumping the gun. Or another example, don't buy the train tickets yet. Don't jump the gun because my boss might not give me holiday time or holiday leave. So don't buy the tickets yet. Don't jump the gun. Don't be too quick. Some idioms with leap. We have a leap of faith. Faith is fe. So, for example, trusting a website designer can be a leap of faith. You need faith in the website designer to do a good job. And in my experience, hiring a plumber or an electrician, or especially a builder, can often be a leap of faith. Another expression, look before you leap. Mirar antes de saltar. Carefully consider the possible consequences before you take action. So if you're thinking of buying a car, but it's very cheap, but it's very expensive to run, for example, the petrol, the insurance, you should look before you leap with this car. Yes, it's cheap, but the insurance and the petrol will be expensive, so be careful. Look before you leap. Don't buy the car too quickly. Another example, she made a mistake when she married this guy. He's terrible. He cheats on her. He's stolen money from her. She should have looked before she leapt. So the past of leap, leapt, L-E-A-P-T. She should have looked before she leapt. And finally, leaps and bounds means very, very fast, very quickly. If something is growing by leaps and bounds, bounds is also to walk with long steps or to run with long steps. So I could say our podcast has been growing by leaps and bounds these last few months. Our Patreon donations have grown by leaps and bounds recently. Raphael also asks about the difference between say and tell. Well, Raphael, we did speak about that. We've spoken about that before, say and tell. Go back to episode 46. That will be inglespodcast.com/46. And also in number 80. So inglespodcast.com/80, 80. You'll find explanations and examples of the difference between say and tell. Also, Raphael asks about engine and motor. What's the difference between engine and motor? Do you know? Because both in Spanish are motor. Well, motors generally run on electricity, and engines usually run on combustion. And here's a definition from WordNet. A motor is a machine that converts other forms of energy into mechanical energy and so imparts motion or results in motion. And an engine is a motor that converts thermal energy to mechanical work. So that's from wordnetweb.princeton.edu. So now we're in the area of physics, aren't we? The difference mechanically, combustion between engine and motor. Well, usually those two words are interchangeable. So if you make a mistake, it's not a huge problem because people will understand you. There are some very strong collocations with those two words. For example, petrol engine is a very strong collocation. That's a very common mix of two words, petrol engine. Steam engine, of course, steam engine. With motor, electric motor, they go together, electric motor. Motor vehicle is a strong collocation, motor vehicle. And motorway, autopista, motorway. And motorboat, of course, barco, motorboat. A barco with an engine is a motorboat. We don't say engine boat, we say motorboat. And finally, another question from Raphael is the difference between raven and crow, two birds. Raven and crow, because in Spanish, both of those birds are cuervo. They're both blackbirds and they look quite similar. Ravens are bigger, they're larger, and very often they travel in pairs, so they like to go around in twos. And crows like to hang out in larger groups, so crows are more social. There are more differences between ravens and crows, but if you're keen on bird watching and you're into birds, there's a link in the show notes for more information. And Raphael also asks about the song Come Together by the Beatles, the British group The Beatles. But he says he's listened to the lyrics. The lyrics are the words of the song, and he doesn't understand anything from the lyrics. And he asks, what's the meaning of the song, Come Together? Well, Raphael, it doesn't mean anything, apparently. Let me tell you the story. There's a guy called Timothy Leary, Leary. You can Google him, Timothy Leary. He was a psychologist who became very famous for experimenting with LSD, which is a drug. Sometimes it's called acid, LSD. And he experimented with LSD as a way to promote social interaction and raise consciousness. Now, eventually these experiments were stopped and he was arrested by the police on drug charges. And in 1969, Leary decided to run for governor of California. Now, if you run for office or if you run for governor or president or prime minister, that means you try to become appointed. You try to get that position. That's the use there of run. So he ran for governor of California. And when he was trying to become governor, he asked John Lennon to write a song for him. And Mr. Leary's campaign slogan for the election, his slogan, his saying that he used, as kind of like advertising was, come together, join the party. Come together, join the party. And he supported drugs. Now, Leary's campaign wasn't successful. He didn't win. But this slogan, come together, join the party, gave John Lennon the idea for the song. And after Timothy Leary decided not to use the song for his political campaign, John Lennon added some nonsense lyrics, some silly words, and he recorded it with the Beatles at Abbey Road Studio. And here's a quote from John Lennon back in a 1980 interview with Playboy magazine. John Lennon said, and I can't do this in a Liverpool accent, I'm sorry. Razor probably could, but I can't. The thing was, this is John Lennon, the thing was created in the studio. It's gobbledygook. Now, the word gobbledygook means nonsense, rubbish, tonterías, rubbish, gobbledygook. He says, come together was an expression that Tim Leary had come up with. To come up with means to think of. So he thought of it. And he asked me to write a campaign song. I tried and I tried, but I couldn't come up with one. But I came up with this, come together, which would not have been any good to him. You couldn't have a campaign song like that, right? So that's the history of Come Together. It is nonsense, Raphael, and it's all because of a political campaign by somebody who supported drugs. And you can listen to the song and read the gobbledygook lyrics if you go to inglespodcast.com/226, where I have put a link to a YouTube video with the song and the lyrics. And now it's your turn to practice your English, because why are you listening to this podcast if you're not practicing your English? We want to hear from you. Razor will be back soon, so we need messages from you, voice messages, so that we can put them in the podcast and then answer your questions and comment on what you think and on your English. So please send us a voice message. You can do that by going to speakpipe.com, speakpipe.com/inglespodcast. And there's a link on the webpage to that voice messaging service. Remember, you have a maximum of 90 seconds. So after 90 seconds, it stops. But I think that's long enough for you to let us hear your English and ask us a question. You could also send us an email to me, Craig, at inglespodcast.com, or you can send an email to Reza at belfastreza@gmail.com. And we would like to thank all of our wonderful patrons who are supporting the podcast. Now, some of you are saying that the list of our Patreons is getting a bit long. And maybe now perhaps it will be better to write your names on the website at inglespodcast.com every week and not read them on the podcast. And I spoke to Reza and we both agree. But we want to say thank you to all the new Patreon subscribers that are joining us each month and are helping us to pay for the transcriptions. And we also want to thank Bruno every week, who is our very generous gold sponsor on Patreon, and mention his website. So thank you, Bruno. And Bruno has a website for walking tours of Copenhagen through his company, CopenhagenWalkingTour.com. And if you're in Rio de Janeiro, Bruno can also help you to get to know the favela area by his walking tours of the favela district. That's favelawalkingtour.com.br. The favela tour is very safe. He uses local guides. It's very safe, and it also puts some money into the community to help improve on their daily needs. So you're also helping people when you take his tour of La Favela. So our latest patrons who have joined us during the summer are Isabel Armada, Mar Carmona, Gabi Rojas. Oh, and Gabi asked about the free How to Pass a Job Interview ebook and audio. That's the very first post, Gabby, on the Patreon page. So if you go to the Patreon page and go to the very first post, you can download that free ebook and audio on how to pass a job interview in English. And that's for our Patreon subscribers only. Also, thank you to Anna, Joanna Mendez, my good friend Chus Martinez, Reynaldo Esparza Garcia, Alfonso, Luis Santiago López Carballo, Mara Nieto, José Manuel Romero García, Fernando Ruiz, Lucas Antonio Soto Frias, José Luis, Adriana Rojas Suárez, and very generous support from Julia Frasquet Morant. Thank you very much, Julia. And the great news to tell you is that in August, and this is 2018, we passed our target of $100. So when we started Patreon, the goal, the target, the aim was to get a minimum of $100 per month so that we can pay for transcriptions for you of the podcast. We've passed that now, which is wonderful. We're collecting $102.80 every month. So we can now guarantee to produce transcripts for you every single week. You can join this program for a minimum of $1 per month, and you get instant access to recent transcriptions, lovingly transcribed by our friend Angelica Bello from Madrid. Go to patreon.com/Ingles podcast. Speaking of Angelica, who transcribes the podcast, she gave me some feedback on my Spanish recently. Thank you, Angelica. In episode 220 about idioms connected to house and home, I mentioned the phrase mi casa tu casa. Well, in Spanish, you say mi casa es tu casa. And Angelica also said that she thinks the expression siéntete como en tu casa can be used in Spain and Latin American countries. We weren't sure if it's the same in both areas of the world. But you don't say siéntete como en tu casa. That means something like sit down as you do at home. That's absolutely right. Thank you very much, Angelica. You know, learning a language is a process. Mistakes are an opportunity to improve. We all make mistakes from time to time, and it's good that we do make mistakes because that's how we learn. So don't be afraid of mistakes. Go out there and speak English. That's the best way to improve. Thank you for listening. On next week's episode, we're going to answer more of your questions, so keep sending them to us. We really look forward to hearing from you. That's it from me. Hopefully Reza will be back very soon, and the dynamic duo will be back together. Thanks for listening, and, well, speak to you next week. Have a great week. Bye. The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.